Hello, I am Bruno Depre. I am a professor at the KU Leuven in Belgium. I will discuss the outputs of our elective in collaboration with Téchne during the academic years 2020 and 2023. In the first step, we had more function as a kind of help desk support. And I will immediately skip to the first assignment we had, and it was for the Al-Fadakai hospital in Yemen, where we needed to create a COVID ward in the level 0 ground level of that hospital. It meant that we had to analyze how COVID had to be dealt with. That means that there was a kind of patient's entry, and I show that directly here. Here was a patient's entry. There was then a specific space for the mild cases, severe cases, and the critical cases. In this country, it was also important that we could split up men and women, and there started our first contact with how you deal with COVID, which was an airborne disease. During this study, we started to understand step by step technical solutions were developed. For instance, here in the interactive window where people are scanned if they are infected or not, and was a specific device which was developed and it was used in this facility. We were still in the period of COVID, so we were trying to understand and to deal with. The next assignment was about the point of entry, what was a kind of checkpoint which would be built at several facilities where many people could come, for instance, an airport, hospital. So it was the aim that people were checked before getting in. And if it was in fact a kind of space where healthcare workers would stay, where patients would wait, and where in case of the disease, where it was seen that the person was infected, they could have laid down and be treated in the first step. It was also important, since COVID was a little bit everywhere at that moment, to understand or think about possibilities to work with local materials. So we designed a wooden structure, we designed a masonry structure with corrugated sheets and so on, so that in fact, whenever in the world it would be necessary, it could be taught to refer to this assignment. We went on with Basecamp, which was designed for the healthcare workers, so that after a day going around in the villages, they had a kind of safe space and relaxing space. So you see here in this Basecamp, there is a kind of public zone, and there was a kind of private zone for the healthcare workers, where they could relax, sport, just sit down, enjoy the time they were in contact with the patients and with the pandemic. The Basecamp first was designed with containers or with constructed places. Then, due to the fact that we had to speed up, meaning to speed up is that the Basecamp needed to be constructed in a faster time, and so there was a kind of, the design was modified, to the use of UNICEF tents, which were available and were in very specific dimensions. So we redesigned the base camp based on these UNICEF standard tents. The layout you see here in this example. A last assignment in the first semester was for the hospital in Bologna, where they had to look at, or they wanted to be the hospital of tomorrow, and there we were asked to propose a kind of human-friendly staff changing room, where also you could redress in a safe way, and where also we had to look at the disinfection system for all your clothes and the lockers. So that was a kind of short in-between assignment. We move on to the second semester. In that case, we were still in the COVID period, and we moved on to design, or we were asked to think about designing and configuring treatment centers. We started to design treatment camps, and the treatment camps were studied for 3 diseases, meaning, first of all, where we were dealing with at that moment was COVID, but in the meantime, there were breakouts of Ebola and cholera. Each of these diseases had their specific demand, their specific staff flow, their specific patient flow, and so we had to analyze all these different way of dealing with these diseases, and so each of these treatment camps had a specific layout and design. Here also we used the UNICEF tent because that was the concept at that moment, so that we could interfere in a very short time, say, okay, we have that layout, we need so many tents, go. Of course, now we designed treatment camps. Then there was also, due to the fact that there's a lot of small breakouts, there was a kind of pre-treatment center. Here's the example for Ebola, and the pre-treatment centers were also designed as well for COVID, Ebola, as these pre-treatment centers were in fact minimal scale with minimum equipment, as a kind of, okay, there is a little village or a few villages where there is a critical moment where there is a breakout, and we can immediately install these pre-treatment centers. After analyzing the pre-treatment centers, the treatment centers, there was a question on a way to look if it was possible to have a kind of multi-disease center, and so we developed this multi-disease center where, with a few adaptations, we could migrate from COVID to Ebola to cholera. From then on, in the next academic year, we started to design support facilities linked to the treatment centers. The idea was, now that in fact the breakout of COVID was not solved, was not finished, but it was a little bit under control, and in the beginning of this COVID, it was a big problem to make it a little bit human, if we can call it like that. And so we were asked to focus on 3 areas, meaning the pre-triage, or the screening point, so where you feel something and you go there as you are already afraid, and then you have to be scanned and screened, and if you have bad luck, you will be kept in the treatment center. So the aim was to make a kind of architectural pre-triage point An equal problem was psychosocial support. So sometimes a family came there with their children. The father and the mother were found that they had the disease. They had to enter the treatment camp, and the children were just left around with maybe another family member. And so we had, or without another family member. And so we were asked to design a facility where family children could stay during the period their parents would recover. And a third point was trying to find a way to design a laundry facility, which is also in each of these treatment centers, and to make it a kind of more livable, let's say. It is a hot place, a moisty place with a lot of relative humidity, and it was asked if we could find a way to make it more workable. So this was the pre-triage in the beginning. Here you see that it was relatively basic, which was in that time, of course, logical. And we were asked to make it a kind of more enjoyable is maybe not the right word, but more human place. There was an option to make a round shape, which is a little bit the idea of a hut in Africa. It was also a wooden construction, and we were also asked to make construction manuals. This was the screening point. We did. This is still the screening point where you see in the red lines, this is the patient flows. They were screened, they had to wait, they had to go in screening, testing, and if they were okay, they could go out. If they were tested negative, if they were tested positive, they had to enter the treatment center. The green arrows are the staff flow, and we see that we try as much as possible to keep a separation between staff and patients. In the left rows, it is the 3D rendering of our computer models to show how it would look like. This was then the construction manual, where step by step was explained how volunteers could build this facility. The same thing for the psychosocial support for the family, where in these pictures you see how it was. It was just kind of louver with some seats, and there you could have a look to your family. So there also we try to make it more architectural, more livable space, with family space, with a nursery, with a playground, with family support possibilities. And we designed a hexagonal building so that we could have a kind of modules which could fit together and can grow or shrink depending on the necessities. Here also we made a complete construction manual. And then the laundry facility was a little bit different. It is not a social or aim, but it's more kind of optimization of working conditions. You see on the right that how the people have to work. They burn literally coal to iron because they have to wash and iron at very high temperature to disinfect all the elements they can reuse. So we started with analysis of how a laundry facility would operate, and then translated that in a facility in a construction, which was in fact a double roof, so that there was a kind of wind movement through the roof, and that there was a shade on the roof above the working spaces, so that the people were in a little bit of air movement, natural ventilation, that they were also protected against sun. Also here, the construction manual was part of the job, if I can tell it like that. We move to the next year, where the next semester, where we were asked to design a pressure swing adsorption plant. That's a facility where we fill oxygen, we produce oxygen to fill oxygen bottles, and everybody has seen the news and problems in hospitals where there was a lack of oxygen, and in these facilities, in these oxygen plants, they fill these oxygen bottles. We were asked to study 3 regions, the Sub-Saharan Africa, the Middle East, and the Southeast Asia part. So for each of these regions, we've had the same approach. And first of all, we start to develop a graphic language since we also were asked to make construction manuals, to talk with symbols in the drawings. You see here our graphic language, and here you see, for instance, that this wooden plank has to be sawn at this point, that here you need nails, and so on and so on. So for each of these regions, we started with climate analysis. From that climate analysis, we defined some key drivers. For instance, in the Sub-Saharan Africa, we had natural hazards, storms, droughts. We had we had a problem with overheating, so we were working with thermal inertia, with the courtyard effect. So we had here also where are floods, where are storms, and here we have an overview of the temperatures. And based on this information, we, in our assignment, try to give an answer to these key drivers. Here again, you see the different approaches. You see also our problem about the drought. So we start to think about if there was rain to reuse the rainwater. Since we had needed thermal mass, the constructions were made in rammed earth. We have here a roof through which the air can flow. The air can flow in that way, the air can flow in that way. Let's say it is a kind of open facility where the air can flow in different ways. To have a good idea of the structure of the roof, the students built a model, and you see here some pictures of that model. Again, there was a construction manual. The construction manual was built depending on the 4 phases of the construction, meaning first foundation, rammed earth, outer walls, construction of the roof, then the inner walls, which were flexible infills. The second part where we were asked to do this study was in the Middle East. There are 5 locations were studied. Again, the same approach was used, namely we have a climate analysis, we define some key drivers, and from these key drivers, you see that again, the temperatures are very high to high. There's not so much wind, there is almost no rainfall. We have in a few locations risk of floods, and in a few locations a risk of earthquakes. If we look to the local architectural solutions, ancient architectural solutions, we see that we work with covered areas, with shade, with withdrawn facades, and with natural ventilation. Thais was the only place in these 5 cities who had a considerable amount of rainfall. And here, Riyadh, we show it to show the very high temperature, where you see that, for instance, almost the full month of June, July, and August, they have temperatures above 40 degrees. For the Middle East project, there was designed a kind of, let's say, Leuven. So in the Leuven, that could be a kind of natural. We have the shading. We have also the natural airflow. Which can go in the way I show, or which can go in this way. We can pass it. So it's completely open structure designed so that we can place photovoltaic panels on top. And under this Leuven, we built 2 buildings, namely the oxygen plant and the facility for the workers. There again, the construction manual was built. We give some examples to show you the detail of the construction manual. And here again was used rammed earth, and for the massivity, the roof was a structure, a non-bed structure. We had a layer to create mass. The third and last region which we studied was the Southeast Asia part. Again, we did the climate analysis, where in this case we see that the wind direction in all places was a little bit the same. We have a risk for typhoons, and our temperatures are more reasonable. There we have as key drivers the natural hazards, flooding, earthquakes, and cyclones. And we will use for that, we will elevate the construction so that the floodings, which are regular situations, can solved. The project can respond to the flooding. We use natural ventilation, which is here quite easy because we have a preferential wind direction. And for the cyclones, we foresee that the roof has multiple surfaces, so that, let's say, that the wind cannot have too many attachment or forces to the roof. We did a little experiment, or the students did a little experiment and tested the model to see if it was possible to make a kind of barrel, a floating solution, a solution floating on barrels. And then they came up with 2 octagonals which were linked together, which were floating in water. So at that moment, they were always floating. Again, here we have on one side the oxygen production plant. On the other side, we have the staff room. We see here also that there are openings in the building, so that we have a kind of natural ventilation going through the facility. In the Southeast region, we work often with bamboo, so the solution was also thought to work with bamboo and corrugated steel. This academic year, first semester, we participated, or we proposed to design for Kenya, Nairobi. In Nairobi, there was decided to go for development of a regional training center of excellence, and KU Leuven was asked to think and design the infection disease training unit. Again, I was asked to make a concept design and building and construction manual. Again, we started with thinking about the climate conditions, and also the specific situation of Nairobi, where there are, for instance, there is one of the largest slums. In the beginning, we started with 3 ideas. The first idea was based on our treatment centers, and we had a kind of translation of the tent layout into buildings. The second thought was, okay, we build everything around a central courtyard. And third was we have village layout, so that people, when they come from their village to the treatment center, they are not confronted being in a kind of unknown environment, but in a kind of village-like solution. From every of these solutions, the pro and cons were studied, and the students have chosen to go for the village layout. The village layout was then detailed. It was a kind of leaves. Also was studied on how we could expand this. There was a detail of the roof. There were some models built. There were some detailed analysis of the waste area in the laundry zone, where we see that every time we see the green color is stuff, there is a red color which is infected area, sometimes patients, sometimes staff, and there is a kind of in-between. For instance, from the laundry, you bring the contaminated laundry, you put it over a fence, you get it from the other side, this is a kind, and then you clean, you disinfect it, and then you go to clean it, to bring it to the storage for further use. These are some images of the design. What you see here is the patient's waiting area. This is the patient's entrance. You come in here. We have the patient's waiting area, where you see this is the inside view, and where the brickwork is done in such a way that there are openings to create a natural ventilation. We have here on the left side an outside view of the room of the patients, and here we talked about how we can make kind of more supportable, more nice environment if you are a patient. So the patient is here, so you have a first fence, sorry for the words, to keep the patients inside. Then you have a kind of disconnecting zone of 2 meters, and then you have a green fence, and the family can come here and speak and see with the patients. There was also an important question for the nursing station, which was inside the facility. You see the different rooms. One of the difficulties of the leaf structures was that patients from the one side to the other side might see inside the other room, because we see there is a glazed surface, so that the nurses and healthcare workers can keep an eye on the patients. So that's why we decided to lift the nursing station, so that they are sitting a little bit higher, and that you can't see from one room to the other. Also here, it was important to give a kind of relaxing zone for the staff, and the staff building had a kind of inner courtyard, where there is sun, where there is shade, where there is green, where there is water, where there is natural ventilation. And then the last assignment dealt with Ukraine, where we were asked to think about a primary healthcare center. In a first step, we had to research what is that, a primary healthcare center, and then again we were asked to have a concept, a design, and then building a construction manual. So thanks to the different countries from where the students are, we were able to analyze the demands for primary healthcare centers from Belgium, Germany, India, Lebanon, Spain, and United Kingdom. From all these analyses were grouped in a huge matrix, and from that huge matrix, we brought it back to what was a minimum requirement for a primary healthcare center, and we called it the matrix, which is here on the right side, where the details are. So we defined an area for different spaces. We defined which spaces should be present. There were questions about temperature, there were questions about technical facilities, and so on. So there were demands on equipment in these spaces, and so on. It becomes a system. So we defined the key drivers. We looked at, okay, what is the problem or what is the situation on the level of climate and on the level of natural hazards in Ukraine. It was analyzed in detail. And then when we go to what our solution should give an answer, we start about construction and thinking about possible constructions, how these constructions can give an answer to the planning or to the layout of primary healthcare center. And then we had also to think, okay, it is a war zone, but it could also be somewhere else in the world, and how we could make it as self-supporting as possible. On the level of construction, we were looking at a kind of modular structure, and let's say from left to right, we go from lightweight to heavy. We had a kind of lightweight modular construction, which is a wooden construction, which has many possibilities, and you can put the modules in different configurations so that you can give an answer to the demands of a primary healthcare center. The next design was with a kind of special modular containers. In fact, the modular containers you can buy them as a kind of frame, if I can call it like that. And that frame can be filled with walls and roofs in a way that you think it would be good. So there again, it is a modularity, and that modularity. So here, the primary healthcare center was designed based on the modularity of these containers. And the last step was the use of standard containers, which were adapted according to the function they would have. As an example, this is an example of a primary healthcare center with the second option to show how the project was developed. Again, there was a construction manual. A specific demand here, due to the fact that we were in a war zone, was that it was self-supporting. So students try to think about what do we need to be self-supporting. Of course, the first thing is that we come to the problem water, so we can recuperate rainwater if there is rainwater. We can recuperate melting snow if there is melting snow, and if not, you have to bring water to the site. And different possibilities were studied this is just an example. The second problem is, of course, energy. We need to warm and chill the spaces. For that, we will use kind of air conditioning installation. We also need good ventilation, which is a separate installation. But we need also in these facilities light to do small operation, to investigate the patient and so on. So we need electricity mainly, and electricity, the first solution is, of course, a generator. This is the easiest solution. And so, to be clear, we were always thinking on the fact that there was no possibility to connect to a kind of power network. So we have a generator, which we in any way we will need. Of course, we were also thinking about a durable solution where we came up with windmills and with photovoltaic panels who give their energy to a storage facility, batteries, who give their power to our primary healthcare center. So thank you very much. I hope it is an introduction, that this introduction is useful for your summer school. I wish you good luck, and of course, hopefully, I'm sure it will be also a lot of interesting fun. Bye.